And Michael, Trump's sentencing now July 11th, 4 days before the start of the RNC, and the presumptive nominee has just been convicted of 34 felonies. Where does this place the Republican Party in this moment?
I think full steam ahead. You've already seen and heard potential vice presidential running mates, as well as other, leaders in the party come out and decry this verdict as un-American and an injustice. Demonizing and trashing the judicial system and the jury system. So that tells you right there that there is no inclination at this point to move away from Trump. In fact, the ring around him tightens, that ring of individual support tightens. So when it comes to the actual convention, while that ultimately will rest with the leadership of the party to decide whether this now convicted felon should be their nominee for president and how they think they can sell that to the American people, they will likely not want to move off of that. Even though you go back and look at the Access Hollywood moment where Reince Priebus and others were wringing their hands and threatening Trump and telling him that he had to stand down, Donald Trump looked him in the eye and said, yeah, try to move me out, right? I'm not standing down. I think this would be that same kind of moment. And so he's the nominee. He's going to run the campaign between the convention and the election. And as we've heard from some of the voters that Shaquille was talking to, they'll ultimately decide whether a convicted felon is the proper extension of who we are as a country.
Yeah, I mean, Simone, last night after the verdict, Trump attended a fundraising event. After his fundraising site reportedly crashed because of an influx of donations, this morning, his campaign is saying that they raised nearly $35 million in small dollar donations between when the verdict came in and midnight. What is going on? What is this?
Well, first of all, we need to wait to see the campaign finance report. And I say that as someone who in a previous life would be on the phone and be talking to people about the fundraising numbers and putting out these type of press releases. In all of the campaigns I ever worked on, we went through great pains to ensure that what we were saying was both accurate and true. And it brings me no joy to say this. The Trump folks have not necessarily been truthful nor accurate. So we need to wait for the campaign finance report to see exactly how much money was raised yesterday. But I think what is going on is, look, there are a subset of voters in this country who have decided that Donald Trump is their guy. And that should not be a surprise to anyone. He is the he is the Republican nominee. And I have every expectation that the Republican Party is going to officially nominate him in their convention in July. That being said, the Republican Party electorate does not make the entirety of the American electorate. There are independent voters in this country. There are moderate Democrats. There are strong Democrats. There are moderate Republicans. There are people that don't even subscribe to a political party who are seeing not just what the results of Donald Trump's actions yesterday, because that is what this verdict is, a result of Donald Trump's actions. But I've also seen all the things that Donald Trump has said and done up into this and the things he is promising to do if he will become president again. And I don't think that that bodes well for him. This is going to, I still believe, be a close election come November. But this verdict yesterday didn't win over any of the folks that Donald Trump needs to win over if he wants to be successful.